Hello and welcome everyone to this first video of the season. We're looking at the County Championship Fantasy Cricket. This is super exciting. Today we're going to overview the whole game, overview the season, and have a little look at some of the tips and tricks of who you should buy, who you should avoid, and maybe some ones to watch. So welcome everyone. This is the first video. So let's get straight into it. So tip number one, we're going to start with a player is only as good as their value. And this is really important. We have 100 million for 15 players. This works out about 6.7 million per player. So some will have to be cheaper. So where does that value come from? And these are important questions to ask yourself when building your team. Is the player you've selected really worth the value? They might be a really, really good player. They might be, a great cricket player, going to pick up lots of runs, pick up lots of wickets, but is it for their value? Is that worth it in the team? So players such as Root and Pope, as good as they will be and as good as they are, will they get points per pound? Can you try and maximise that points per pound? Also, you need to make sure that your players are actually playing. So, for example, Cam Green, Kane Williamson, and Matt Henry are really great picks, but they're not starting the season. So maybe at this point in the season, they're not as good. So that's just tip number one, making sure you're trying to maximise that value, work out all 15 players within the 100 million budget. You can't just pick all the top players. So where does that money go? Okay, tip number two. I'd recommend a Division 2 focus. Whilst the Division 2 cricket remains really high level, even though it's sort of looked down upon within the game, it does remain a high level. And there's a lot of very good players in Division 2. But it is generally thought that sort of accumulating runs in Division 2 is a little easier. So just looking at 2024, last season, the amount of people averaging above 50 in Division 2 was 23, whereas in Division 1 it was 16. So you could argue that there's a slight difference there, and perhaps scoring runs in Division 2 is a little easier. So this sort of suggests that maybe very good players thrive in Division 2, and therefore maybe those who have dropped down from Division 1 last season, we're looking at Lancashire, we're looking at Kent, maybe Kent to a bit of a lesser extent as they've got a bit of a rebuild year this year, maybe really good players to target. So how can you look to target those people? We're talking about people like Keaton Jennings, Josh Bohannon, Will Williams. These are really, really good players, and actually, even though they're in Division 2, there's a lot of good talent in Division 2 that might score some more points than perhaps their Division 1 rivals who have to maybe play a little higher standard of cricket. Okay, tip number three, maximising your all-round position. This is where you're going to get a lot of points. The bonus of having them be able to score points from both bat and ball is massive. If they bat and bowl twice in the game, that's 4 opportunities to score points rather than just the 2 for a batter or a bowler. So that's also where you're going to want to look to captain. These players, the double points for them will be huge. You might only have them pick up 30 runs in the first innings, 30 runs in the second innings, in their batting innings, 2 wickets in their first bowling innings, 2 wickets in the second bowling innings. But actually, that accumulates to a much larger amount of points than someone who maybe bats and scores back-to-back half centuries, which is amazing. But actually, that all-rounder is still going to score higher, despite having maybe a less impact on on one focal point in the game. So that's really important. The way the game's structured, you can have 4 proper all-rounders in there, and I'd really recommend you do that. Of course, if you want to use one of your slots for an extra bowler or an extra batter, one of the all-rounder slots, you're more than welcome to. And, at times that can be really good in the right situation. But I think starting off the season with 4 strong, proper all-rounders who will both bat and bowl and play a big role for their teams is really important. And we'll get to some of those players later. But I think that's a really important idea. Tip 4. This is a bit more of a technical tip, but you're going to want to set up your team with a long-term mindset. So there's only a time in the season. This is the only time in the season where you can make unlimited changes for free. So really, you want to go in with the right team now. You want to set yourself up to be able to excel for the rest of the season. You would also notice if you go through in the fixtures that not every team will play in the weeks between game week 4 and 6. Each team will blank once, and so you want to make sure that you're not having all your players blank in the same week, because then you're going to really struggle to figure that out with transfers and things. So trying to have players on the bench that can come on and play, trying to split your blanks between the 3 weeks, and trying to sort of work through that kind of that phase with transfers, so you can have a full playing 11 every week. And then this sort of involves also trying to target super cheap options that are still likely to play, so they can sub and fill in these weeks. Like I mentioned, your bench is really important. So when you're setting up your team now, there's no point in putting four million value players on your bench who are unlikely to play, because come these weeks you're going to need some bench cover. You're going to need to sub in some maybe cheaper options. So making sure you have cheap but playing options on your bench is super important. Also, you might not want to work with a player who's only going to play the first couple of games of the season, or who's maybe like to be rested. So we're talking international players and talking England players. Someone like Brooke is a really good option. Not playing in week one, but maybe playing week two. But then after that, how many games is he going to play? But when will he get rested? It's a really good option, and I'm sure he'll score a lot of runs. He's an amazing player. But is that going to really maximise your points? If he gets rested for a week, do you have the bench cover to deal with that? It's an added headache. Okay, so there's sort of just some tips and tricks and ideas of what you want to be doing going into this county draft season. So now I'm going to just give you 2 players to buy, 2 players to avoid, and 2 players that are the one to watch for the season. So just topping off this player to buy section, we've got Ryan Higgins, an amazing player, a proper all rounder. He averaged 70 with the bat and 28 with the ball last season. Picked up so many points. He has done this for many years, and he's likely to keep doing it. Over the winter, he's been playing out in Zimbabwe, and he picked up 4 wickets against Hampshire in the preseason. So he's in a little form. He's got a lot of good numbers behind him. He's an absolute canny operator in county cricket. He knows what he's doing. He's an experienced player. He'll play a big role for Middlesex this season, who are pushing for promotion, and he's going to do really well. And I think he's someone who's got to be a lock on your team. He might even be my captain this week, but I'll leave that for you to find out in a later video. But he's going to be up there in the top of the point scoring list, as he is every year. He should be in your team. Second up, we've got Sam Cook. He took 43 wickets at 17 last season. Unbelievable numbers. He's a fantastic bowler. I'm sure we all know he's in line for an England call-up. That will probably happen sometime this summer. But also, it'll probably be a while away, so it's going to be okay. Maybe he gets rested. I think it's worth the risk with him. He's so good. He's got the opportunity to pick up 5 wickets in the first session of a day, to pick up 10 wickets a game, and just tick over with the points, consistent points. And that's exactly what you want. He got 1,631 points last year, which was huge. So I think he's a really important shoe-in for your team. I definitely recommend him. Okay, a player to avoid. So I'm looking at Simon Harmer here. He's always a good pick. He got 45 wickets last year. He's a very good spin bowler. But I think one qualifying point is that he's not effective in the early seasons as much. April tends to be dominated by seam. And so for 8.8 million, it seems very expensive for someone who might sort of come into their own towards the end of the season. He's a very good bowler, don't get me wrong. He picks up a lot of wickets, he picks up a lot of points, he can hold a bat. But for that price mark, I think there's a lot of better options to go for. We talk like someone like Sam Cook. They're a similar price. They're both bowlers. Would you rather Sam Cook early season or Simon Harmer early season? And this similar kind of thing goes for someone like Liam Dawson, but who's even more expensive. But actually, I think because of his value he shares with the bat, it doesn't quite come under the same category. So I think Simon Harmer is one to avoid, at least in this early season, and sort of maybe see how he does and see if he comes to a bit of form, and then maybe pick him up later on. Okay, second player to avoid is James Rue. Now, this one might seem strange. He had a breakout season in 2023, scoring more than 1,000 runs, an average of 57. He's caught a lot of England interest, earning himself a spot on the Lions team. And while undoubtedly he's a good player, he's not hit over 31 in the last 7 first-class matches, which includes 3 Lions matches. He only averaged 36 last season, and so if you're only able to pick 1 wicketkeeper or 3 batters, there's a lot of good options out there. And I don't think James Rue is someone you want to be picking who can maybe average 36 again. He's got a really high upside. There's potential he can average 50, 60 again. and have another really good season. But there are also a lot of other options who maybe are more consistent and more likely to score those kind of runs. He's also not that kind of super cheap value pick as he has been in previous seasons. A couple of seasons ago, even last season, he was fairly cheap. He actually fitted into a lot of sides very easily because he was a value pick. Whereas around his price point this year at 7 million, there's also Adam Lyth, Tom Haynes, Emilio Gay, Jake Libby, who are also really good picks, perhaps more consistent and maybe a better pick than James Rue. So for me, he's one to avoid. And again, just see how he goes. If he has a really good start to the season, he's in a bit of form, there's absolutely no problem with going there. But I think for now, avoid. Finally, one to watch, two to watch even, starting with Cam Green. The Australian international is playing in Division 2 for Gloucestershire, a huge pickup for them. He's been riddled by injuries, but he's supposed to turn up to them for game week 3 of this game. So not one to buy now, but definitely one to keep an eye on when he eventually starts playing. He's a proper all-rounder, and in Division 2 could score bags of runs and is pretty nifty with the ball too. So as long as he can stay uninjured and he turns up to Gloucestershire, he can have a hell of a season. And he's definitely one to watch for fantasy. He'll pick up a lot of points when he arrives. So definitely keep your eye on him. Now, someone who is playing from the start of the season, and my second one to watch, is Joey Everson. It's a little interesting one. Perhaps it's a little recency bias there because he hit a double century in a preseason game against Loughborough University in the recent weeks. He also picked up 2 wickets in that game and scored a half century in another warm up game. So he's been a really fine nick early in the season. He's doing really well. And for that Kent side, he's going to be super important. And they're going to want to go back up. They're not going to want to stay in Division 2 for too long. And Joey Everton provides with both bat and ball, and he'll be really important to them. With Kent now in Division 2, he might even have a better season than he did last season. And so I think he's definitely one to watch, and even maybe one to pick up for them start the season, as I may have. So thank you. That's all for today. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed some tips and tricks, some people to buy and some not to buy. So enjoy. I'll have my team selection out for you all tomorrow at some point. So get your teams ready ahead of the deadline, 11 a.m. tomorrow. And let's enjoy the county championship because it's back. That's amazing. So thank you very much, and see you soon.